Evolving Information Leadership at the University of Sydney Library. Kate's the Senior Manager of Copyright and Information Policy at the University of Sydney Library. And I'll pass to Kate.
I'm about to do something that everyone told me I should not attempt, which is use live technology. Let's see if we can break the internet. So, kia ora koutou katoa. So as the bio said, I'm Kate, I'm from the University of Sydney, and I'm also an Aucklander. So it's really fun to be home in Tamaki Makaurau. Now, this means that while my wonderful colleagues are staying downtown in a beautiful hotel, I'm sleeping on my dad's floor and being taught to skateboard by my 13-year-old half-sister. So this makes me sound a lot younger than I really am. I'm a fairly new manager, and I'm a new leader, and I'm in a room, and I'm full of managers and leaders, and so what I'd like to do with this spectacular opportunity is invite you to participate in an interactive session around information leadership. So, see that website? Go there and follow the instructions. I will explain that in a little more detail in just a moment, but you can probably figure it out for yourselves. What I'd like to do first is say, what do I mean by information leadership? So I mean using information domain expertise to shape discussions and decisions around the ongoing digitalisation of research and education and scholarly communication at a governance and legislative and institutional culture level. So I mean deliberately and visibly putting strategy and policy and advocacy at the heart of a research library. And so yesterday morning when John O'Brien talked about strategic leadership challenges in IT, that really resonated with me. He talked about getting a seat at the strategy table. He talked about changing the conversation and leveraging expertise so IT is treated like a strategic asset, a partner in development, not just a utility. I think libraries and other professional service units like the research portfolio, like the research office, we have a similar challenge. And at Sydney, our traditional library roles and our traditional library structures, I think we've broken the internet already, didn't facilitate conversations with the key players who set the strategic direction of the university. So my question, and I want you to tweet this with the hashtag InfoLeaders, and so we can see if this actually works. How might we grow our capacity for information leadership so we can influence change in a crowded information landscape? Now I assume you all had a device. Yes? Okay. So if you haven't already, I'm going to try and drive two devices now, so I may totally break the internet. What I would like you to do now is not that, but what I would like you to do, yeah, someone, I think conference Wi-Fi is a lesson learned for next time. What I would like you to do is answer a test question for me, which is, hey, it's already up. Because we're information professionals, we can tell the difference between real news and fake news. I don't know about you, but I think there's never been a more important and interesting time to be in this profession. So technology fails aside, I knew that was a risk. I would like to tell you a story about Sydney's information leadership journey to date. And as we go, I would like to try to use this platform, and possibly break it, to seek insight from you as my leadership peers. And I hope, maybe, that by the end of this session, we will have generated a collective infographic that you can take away and start a conversation. But first, I'd like to take a step back and just kind of frame up a little bit. So as Sue Roberts mentioned in her keynote this morning, and I suspect that she might have left that in just for me, so I do appreciate that, we're living in a VUCA world. I'm not so sure about the volatility, that sounds like a little much, but definitely somewhere that is uncertain and complex and ambiguous. We talk about megatrends, we talk about wicked problems. And so, are any of these up for discussion in your organisations? So, front of mind for me, I identify with the ongoing digitalisation of education and work, the idea of a disruption and automation of a lot of roles. This has impacted a lot in the library sector and also in education. And we see emerging skills gaps, and we also see changing consumer expectations for commercial experiences, and this includes education and cultural experiences as well. And then on top of this is going to keep running in the background, I hope, so let's see if this works. Well, the federal budget comes out today, I think, over in Australia, and so we're likely to also see an increasing financial burden on students. We're talking around a 7.5% tuition fee hike, a continued downward pressure, changing incentives for education and research funds, also things like growing student diversity, increased competitiveness and international student mobility, changing workforce skills and roles, and this overarching narrative around the democratisation of access to knowledge and access to information and access to education. But in reality, we see digital literacies and access to quality educational experiences are still unequal. I have to flip over. So what does an environment like this mean for the University of Sydney or for library or for your research library? Well, for us, it's meant a period of sustained change and a renewed focus on strategic alignment. So there are a number of challenges that we're facing our library, and I'm sure that we're not alone. We had an organisational structure that could be described as traditional. It was arranged by discipline. It focused on the curation of physical information resources. And so separated by discipline, no single director had oversight of liaison and outreach or of the site-based services. And this inhibited our internal processes and our improvement, greatly impacted technology adoption, and perhaps more importantly, it impeded our engagement with the wider university community, the university executive, and our peak industry bodies. And so we were constrained by this siloed organisational structure, and we had not adapted well to environmental change. And so in 2013 to 2015, we embarked on an ambitious and very large-scale program of change led by our university librarian Anne Bell and her team to realign and in some cases completely reimagine the library's organisational governance structure, staff roles, skill sets, spaces and collections and services. And while you fill out that poll, we would do this by redesigning our structure to arrange teams by expertise, not just by discipline. Something that was maybe lacking in a previous approach was identifying the needs of the university community and really putting the students at the centre of everything, at the centre of our service design. We also focused a lot more strongly on understanding and prioritising the university's strategic agenda, and then developing programs proactively and in partnership with the deans, faculties, PSUs and stakeholders, and our strategy office. And that's all very well. We like to talk about collaboration, we like to talk about partnership, but true partnership is a real challenge. It is hard. So to facilitate engagement with the university, Anne and her team carved out this deliberate space for the promotion of the library's role as an information leader in this space by bringing a policy writer's expertise into a key role. And that's me, information policy. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is a strategic leadership stream. Who let the bureaucrat in? You tricked me. Well, it's not a trick. It's not a trick. While strategic leadership creates a vision, strategic planning provides the direction and alignment and an understanding of the wider environment. Policy provides the principles to guide decision-making at scale. And my other policy colleagues sitting in the audience, I hope, will agree with me. Decision-making at scale across the university. And so I think, policy and strategy should work together. So if universities as a whole, if universities don't take a principled position on challenges in the information domain, then technology will drive and disrupt our agendas. So instead of technology being used as a tool to advance the goals and values of our universities. So what does this look like in practice? So this is where we really get to try to break the app. So what I want to do is share with you some recent examples where my colleagues and I think that our renewed focus on strategic alignment and information policy principles have opened some new opportunities. But I'm nosy. I want to know what you've been up to in your organisations, and I want to see the opportunities that you see. So what I'm going to try and do is put up this. There we go. And put up this free text poll. Fingers crossed that it works. And it's a bit like Strategy Snap or Strategy Bingo. The more ideas that go up there that are the same, the bigger the words should get. I'm not seeing anything yet, so I really hope it's going to work. If not, I got some slides in the background. So, there we go. So I mentioned that strategy and policy should work together. So the first example I want to talk about is a strategy project. So we worked with a design thinking practitioner, Larissa Silva, and took a user-centered approach to our strategic planning to place our staff and students at the centre of our models. So in addition to the qualitative and quantitative survey sources and benchmarking tools that we normally use, we engaged with our university community using a series of principles, or rather a series of questions. So we got our staff and students together in a social setting, and then we fed them, and then we asked them, what do you need to thrive? We didn't say library, we didn't even say university or learning. We just asked, what do you need to thrive? And then they told us. And some of the things that Jordan mentioned: pride of place, connection, social interaction. And in many regards, trying to develop a strategic plan from scratch is not unlike a policy process. And the reason I'm telling you about this is my role in all of this as a policy writer and as a writer was to synthesize the flood of information that came back from our colleagues and students from across the community. We also undertook 15 consultations with senior leaders from right across the university, from every single discipline. We took the vision of my university librarian and my strategy and the strategy working group. And then I had to go away and read all of the trends in higher education, and then take the university's strategic priorities into account, and then distill all of this into a coherent narrative and plan to guide our engagement with the university through to 2020. And the resulting strategic plan is very ambitious. Don't all do it at once because you might break the app, but it's also sitting there, and it should be sitting there in a tab that says Slides Beta. There's also a copy of my transcript in case there's anything that I missed. The greatest benefit, however, was spending the time building relationships with and understanding the drivers of stakeholders from right across the university. I'm going to switch it back to the poll and see how that's going. Hooray! Look at that. So for example, in terms of understanding drivers, that one of the themes expressed by the most senior leaders across the university was the rise of dataism, data-driven everything, data, connected data, open data, linked data, big data. But we know that when it comes particularly to research exercises, research methods, the Australian legal framework hasn't exactly kept up with changes in this space. Hang on. And so information policy provided a way to guide our decision-making in this space. So the Hague Declaration on Knowledge Discovery in the Digital Age is a tool that aims to foster, a policy tool that aims to foster agreement about how best to enable knowledge to data and facts. It's based on the idea that the right to read equals the right to mine, and provides an ethical framework to support researchers and educators and students to deploy contemporary research techniques. So as information advocates, library staff led the investigation into the declaration and prepared a recommendation to the senior executive that the university should sign to align with a growing strategic interest at that time, not yet a strategy, strategic interest in promoting data science and investment in the new informatics hub and Centre for Translational Data Science, an investment in new roles across the university in different portfolios to support digital research practices, data management planning, publishing and curation. So our Vice-Chancellor, who's an IP specialist, so that was kind of scary, he agreed, and we were one of the first institutions to sign. And while it's not law reform yet, having a really clear position on proactively enabling contemporary research practices really helps. It helps us to work proactively with electronic content vendors to provide broader access to our electronic collections so people can actually go in and mine them. It helps us make decisions around the text and data mining of our own digital cultural collections through our digitisation program. And it enables our data management colleagues to provide really constructive guidance to the university community. Also, while I'm on intellectual property, my team and I worked with colleagues from the Vice-Chancellor's Office and General Counsel and the Law School and the Research Portfolio, massive team effort, to draft submissions to contribute the university's support on copyright law reform and the Productivity Commission's investigations into intellectual property arrangements. And the greatest benefit was not just in the submission or being cited by the Productivity Commission and their recommendations to government, or in signing the declaration itself, but it was in the relationships that had developed between the library and the Office of General Counsel and the Research Portfolio and the Vice-Chancellor's Office. And this relationship had developed because there's a role there, and we have the capacity to contribute information policy expertise through a key role. Now, I'm not sure how I'm doing for time. All right. So developing our copyright and information policy position has also enabled open access to more of our unique Australian collections, including Legacy Theses and On Histoire, the university's infamous student newspaper, and my colleague Kat presented a poster on this yesterday. Here's Ani. So to progress our digitisation program, so Kat and colleagues developed a principles-based digitisation plan that aligned with the university's strategy and the library's values and strategic goals. We also engaged with colleagues from the law school and our general counsel to develop a position on digitisation and access and to identify the risks. Again, you're probably thinking, yeah, you're a bit late to the digitisation party, right? Like, quite late to the digitisation party. Well, maybe. But ONI and the Legacy Thesis project had been on our list for a really, really long time. And it was the two elements, strategic alignment and information policy, that meant that we could get this project over the line where we had previously failed. Technological obstacles and a very strong aversion to risk that had previously prevented this project from moving forward. So I have one more example, and this one's quite new. We've been having initial discussions with our National Centre for Cultural Competence on Indigenous knowledge and information systems and how those two things might work together. I'm really struggling. Live technology, fun, huh? So far, my colleagues and I have been contributing information expertise on some external projects, so projects outside the library, including digital cultural collections, and on the very recently released Cultural Competence Aboriginal Sydney MOOC, which is up on Coursera, and I highly recommend that you check out because it is a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. So our next steps, though, will be to take this relationship and work with different groups to be able to incorporate cultural competence principles into our systems. So we So an example of this is we have some really significant gaps in our collections that we need to address. But to be able to do this, we need to be able to manage born digital cultural collections of Indigenous knowledge sources and scholarship in ways that are respectful and ethical. And so it's essential that this program of work is guided by information policy principles, and I mean that in a really broad sense, from copyright and intellectual property to principles around community ownership and cultural protocols around access to sensitive subject matter, guidance on the ethical and respectful access to and reuse of traditional knowledge sources. So this is a really new area of interest, but it has to be guided by principles. And in terms of strategic alignment, this program of work aligns with a university-wide strategy to develop cultural competence as a graduate quality for all students. So by partnering with our National Centre for Cultural Competence, we can enable researchers, educators and students to create and discover and share collections of Indigenous knowledge sources responsibly. Responsibly and respectfully. And then that puts us in a position to explore further opportunities to develop the university's cultural competence agenda by incorporating Indigenous knowledge sources into information and digital literacy training in the future. So it starts to really open things up. So even taking our first baby steps in this space, information policy principles and alignment with our university's strategic goals become these tools that can guide our decision making. So these projects, and there are many others, have progressed the library's leadership role as an expert advisor. Possibly not as a technologist today, but as an expert advisor to the university community. And through these projects, the university is starting to leverage information domain-specific expertise. I think there's also a role there where the university can leverage the research portfolio's expertise, the education portfolio's expertise, IT expertise in a similar way. So we all have really unique skills and unique qualities and points of view that we can bring into the mix. And I feel like we're starting to move in the right direction where our Associate Dean of Law calls me up. She's a copyright expert. I'm not a lawyer. She calls me up to talk about education innovation licensing, or licensing for education innovation and open education resources. True story. Quite pleased with that one. But that's enough from me, and I think I've learned my lesson about using technology live. But the theme of the session is evolving information leadership. So the thing is, we're learning as we go, and I'd also be really interested to know what information leadership might mean for you and the sorts of things that you're doing at your organisations. Thanks. And seeing as that's not working, there should be, I hope, an infographic that I will send out on Twitter that will give you your responses.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. There's some people with questions for Kate. Clearly, that's a real achievement to have mobilised and worked collaboratively with that many people around a university. That's impressive in itself. So obviously your influencing skills are strong. Are there some questions for Kate? Or comments about what's happened in your institution, or does everyone feel shamed into silence by that?
Silence. Oh, I don't want to shame people into silence. That wasn't my intention. Oh, that's a good question, actually. So there's 2 levels. So there's a university strategy, and then there's the university library strategy, and they kind of hang together. But in both of them have a huge focus on culture. So both strategies have culture as one of the streams, and one of the areas in that regard is around breaking down barriers between the silos, like fostering better communication between the professional service units. In terms of what we're doing, so in the library, we've been working on our internal culture and capability. So we're using tools like insights and crucial conversations other tools like an experts program, so bringing people in on a range of topics to come and talk to our staff. We have show and tell days, which are like tiny baby conferences to try and build our leadership capacity right across the university. So leadership as a behaviour, as a quality, rather than leadership as your place on the org chart. And that's been really, you know, there's that wonderful phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Yeah, so we've been working really, really hard on the culture, on the internal culture piece. And then the next step is really to work really hard on that cultural competence piece as well. Hello. Apart from trying to drive live technology in a conference session, I'll never learn, honestly. I think the biggest mistake has either been trying to go policy first rather than principles first. And I would say that from my previous experience with a research portfolio as a policy writer. And the biggest mistake is probably not doing enough of the engagement piece first. So going out to staff and students first, the first thing that you do. So in that starburst diagram, the staff and students at the centre, and I've got to go back to it now. It's on the app. But what it's trying to express is that we connect with staff and students, and then there's all of these other groups around the university, but it's always with our staff and student communities. Yeah, undercooking the engagement piece. Especially Sydney's huge. It's really hard to communicate in an organisation that size. I see my colleagues nodding down the front. It's totally true. It's really, really hard. And so, yeah, more engagement than you think that you need. That's a good question. Well, apart from the fact that library only gets mentioned once in the university strategic plan, are very much the same. So we took yes, they are, and so do go and download it. If you can't find it from the app, if you Google University of Sydney Library Strategic Plan, 2016 to 20, you should get it. But what it does is it rolls directly underneath the university strategic plan, which is around education, research and culture. There are these three streams. And ours is structured in the same way. It's education, research and culture. And so our plan hangs off the university's strategic goals. And so everything that we do in terms of operationalising the plan, everything that we do has to hit those strategic goals. We don't do anything unless it actually addresses the university's strategic goals directly. And sometimes, and that's been really interesting, that's been a really good guide in terms of do more of, stop doing that, think about how you can reposition this area. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Wrap it up there. I'm sure Kate will be around for a couple of minutes if people want to grab her on the way out. That was fascinating. Please join me with thanking her. That's great. Well done.